Hey, peace. What's happening, everyone? On our deal with.
Recognize royalty. Recognize royalty. Gotta recognize it. Recognize royalty. Like they ain't got eyes to recognize royalty.
Wait, first of all, give me your definition of Pan-Africanism. Let's start right there.
Pan-Africanism?
Yes.
Well, okay, what I understand was Pan-Africanism was the idea that people of African descent have a common history of struggle, no matter where in the globe they are.
Okay, stop right there. Give me a common struggle with Black Americans and with anybody from Africa, any group from Africa. Give me one common struggle.
Well, I mean,. There's the common struggle of white supremacy.
Stop. They
There's
don't
economic-
have a... No. Stop right there. They don't have a struggle with white supremacy.
Okay.
They are the majority. No, just listen. Because I said something that you're not, I mean, that's new to you, I think. So you want to know more about that. Well, why would you say that, Unbiased Ron? White folks live here. They're the majority here. That's white supremacy. They only control everything here. They have their own countries, my guy. They're the majority. How is there white supremacy in their countries?
Right, but when the roots of Pan-Africanism started, I think that...
No. Listen what I'm saying. I'm saying never, ever did white people, never, ever were they not the majority in their country.
I'm not disagreeing with you at all.
Okay, so how can something be supreme if it's small enough? Listen, bro. How can something be supreme when it's small in numbers?
I get where you're going. I'm actually not disagreeing.
Right. So we don't have so our issue is that we've been the minority.
Fair enough.
Okay, but listen, let me drive this home. Our issue that we've been a minority amongst a majority who hates us and been holding us back for all of our time in this country. They never experienced that.
I think that's a great, and I think I was going to say that those principles from the 50s and 60s, they don't apply today. So I totally agree with you.
But no, they never did, because you just said we have a common struggle in white supremacy. I'm like, nah, their countries ran on Black supremacy.
Fair enough.
Black people were supreme there. So that's why I said we don't have, so people say that, but they can't give an example.
I think I can give an example. I think anyone who's thinking can give an example. The idea that white supremacy only works if whites are in the majority. Yeah, I can give an example. I think South Africa should be an obvious example for anyone and for everyone. And, since it's not an obvious example for everyone, I asked ChatGPT, were whites a minority in apartheid South Africa? And it says yes, whites were always a numerical minority in apartheid South Africa, yet they had nearly total political, legal, and economic power. And isn't that what white supremacy is about? The fact that they have total political, legal, and economic power, whether they are the numeric majority or not. It says and it gives the population breakdown during apartheid. It says in South Africa during the height of apartheid, the 50s to the 80s, Black Americans were approximately 70 to 75%, whites were 15 to 20%, colored were 8 to 9, and Indians or Asians were approximately 2 to 3. So despite being about 1 in 5 people or fewer, whites rule the country. A minority ruled a majority. White minority rule was enforced through law, violence, and bureaucracy, not consent. Voting, only whites could vote nationally. Citizenship, Black Africans were stripped of South African citizenship and assigned to Bantustans. Land, approximately 87% of land reserved for whites. Movement, passed laws controlled where Black people could live or work. Economy, whites dominated banks, mines, farms, and industry. This is the textbook definition of racial authoritarianism. textbook definition. Why this matters historically. Apartheid proves an important point. White supremacy does not require numerical majority, only institutional control. This mirrors colonial rule across Africa, Jim Crow in the US South, Rhodesia, modern Zimbabwe. In each case, a small white population governed a much larger non-white population through law and force. And the one that stood out for me, I don't know about y'all, but the one that stood out for me is Jim Crow in the US South. It also says there was a white minority in the Jim Crow South. And the reason that's interesting to me is that the same guy who was saying white supremacy, you need a white majority for white supremacy. This is the same guy who says that, Jamaicans and Caribbeans should have fought back against the white man during slavery because they were the majority. And he seems to think that in the South, the blacks were the majority. But that's not what ChatGPT says. And I think that may be the public opinion, is that there was a white majority in the South during Jim Crow. But that's not necessarily true. That's not necessarily true according to ChatGPT. So I asked ChatGPT, were whites a minority in the Jim Crow South? And it says yes. Whites were often a numerical minority or close to it in large parts of the Jim Crow South, especially in the Deep South, yet they controlled politics, law, land, and violence. The basic demographic reality in many southern states from the late 1800s through the early 1900s, Black people made up 40 to 60% or more of the population. Example, in Mississippi, Blacks were approximately 58 to 60%. In South Carolina, it was 55 to 60% Black. Louisiana, approximately 47% Black. Alabama, 45%. Georgia, 45%. This was all within the United States. So in several states, Black Americans were the majority, yet had almost no political control. How a minority ruled a majority. White supremacy in the Jim Crow South functioned exactly like other minority-ruled systems. Disenfranchisement, poll taxes, literacy tests, grandfather clauses, violence and terror, lynching, race riots, Ku Klux Klan intimidation, legal segregation, separate but equal laws, economic control, sharecropping, convict leasing, debt peonage. Power was maintained through law plus violence, not votes. The key historical point, white supremacy does not require whites to be the majority, only to control institutions. That's why Jim Crow worked despite Black majorities, lasted nearly 100 years after slavery, parallels apartheid South Africa and colonial rule. In all cases, a smaller white population ruled a larger non-white population. Another question that I think is worth asking is, how does white supremacy exist across Africa? So far we've spoken about just South America, mainly because, we wanted to highlight just the fact that white supremacy doesn't need a numeric majority. But I think when the guy in the video answered the question, he was speaking about white supremacy across Africa. So I did kind of want to see how does, or talk about how does white supremacy exist in Africa, not just in one country in Africa, but across Africa. And it says white supremacy exists in parts of Africa, not as an African-created ideology, but as a colonial system that was imposed, institutionalized, and in some cases never fully dismantled. It shows up structurally, economically, culturally, and geopolitically rather than as mass white majority rule across the continent. 1. Colonial rule created racial hierarchies. European empires ruled Africa using explicit racial ideology. Europeans equal civilized, rational, destined to rule. Africans equal primitive, to be governed, exploited, or uplifted. This logic justified land seizure, forced labor, taxation systems designed to coerce work, separate legal systems for whites versus Africans. Colonial administrations codified whiteness as authority, embedding white supremacy into law, education, and governance. And again, this pretty much just goes to show and to highlight that white supremacy is not about white majority or having a white majority, as some people are confused to believe. Number 2, settler colonization made white rule permanent in some regions. In places with large European settler populations, white supremacy became formal state ideology. Examples: South Africa, apartheid from 1948 to 1994, legally enforced white supremacy, passed laws, racial citizenship, land ownership by race. Zimbabwe, formerly Rhodesia, a tiny white minority ruled millions of Africans until 1980. Even after independence, economic power often remained concentrated in white hands. 3. Economic dominance without political rule. In many African countries today, landmines, banks, and corporations are still disproportionately foreign-owned. European firms extract wealth, while Africans supply labor. Trade terms favor former colonial powers. This is sometimes called neo-colonial white supremacy. No governors or flags, but control through debt, corporations, and trade rules. 4. Cultural and psychological supremacy. Colonialism also reshaped identity. European languages equal educated, African languages equal backward. Lighter skin equals professional or beautiful. African history minimized, European history elevated. This produces internalized hierarchy. And I think this is the important piece here and what makes white supremacy possible without having a majority. This produces internalized hierarchy, where whiteness is subconsciously associated with intelligence, leadership, or modernity, even without white people present. 5. Global power structures still privilege whiteness. International systems born during colonial eras still matter. IMF and World Bank conditional loans, UN Security Council dominated by Western powers. Western media frames African nations as unstable or dependent. These structures reinforce a global racial order, where African states have less leverage. Important distinction, and this matters. White supremacy in Africa is not Africans believing whites are superior by nature. It's not Africa being a white continent. It is a system imposed from outside with lingering effects. Africans resisted it historically and continue to challenge it through decolonization movements, language and cultural revival, economic nationalism, and Pan-Africanism. So I think the definition of Pan-Africanism that was given by the gentleman at the beginning of the video, he defined Pan-Africanism as the idea that Black people everywhere have a shared struggle, and that struggle being white supremacy. I think that is a good and a substantiated definition for Pan-Africanism. So, that I think should answer that. And I think that should correct that misunderstanding and that misguided notion that you need a white majority in order to have white supremacy. And so the original question that he asked of what do Black Americans and Black Africans or Black people all over the world, what do they all share? What do they all have in common? What they've all had in common historically, or what has been claimed to be the common experience, is that of white supremacy. And so, the guy he was talking to, his response was actually correct. He gave the correct response of white supremacy. And that response was, disavowed on the incorrect notion that white supremacy needs a white majority. So, that's what I wanted to point out again today. Unbiased moron can be quite wrong almost all the time, almost all of the time. But that's all we have for today, man. You done know. As usual, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.
I want you to listen very, very carefully.
Just because we're black, they say we are slaves. Speak of righteousness, they say we are praise. Just because we're black, they say we are slaves. Speak of righteousness, they say we are praise. Brought us from the motherland in bondage and chains. Bury our culture and change our names. They claim we're free, yet we are in pain. As long as there's life, there's a lot to gain. Just because we're black, they say we are slaves. Speak of righteousness, they say we are praise. Just because we're black, they say we are slaves. Speak of righteousness, they say we are praise. When God spoke his words, they said he was deranged. Marley sung his songs, they said the same. Malcolm X and Martin Luther fought relentlessly so we could be better. Just because we're black, they say we are slaves. Speak of righteousness, they say we are praise. Just because we're black, they say we are slaves. Speak of righteousness, they say we are praise. Brought us from the motherland in bondage and chains. Bury our culture and change our names. They claim we're free, yet we are in pain. As long as there's life, there's a lot to gain. Just because we're black, they say we are slaves.